to address right now?
There's one thing that I wanted to call out. Obviously, we'll say this a few times in the broadcast, but Griffin Football has a list of unbelievable sponsors that really help us out here. First and foremost, all of this would not be possible without Billy Brown and the advancement team for Griffin Football. Thank you so much to everything that you do. But for the sponsors who also support, big one, Fear the Herd, Montana's. Mike Vanderhoven with Montana's in Guelph here does an unbelievable job supporting the players, supporting the coaches, parents and alumni with 50% off of all the players while they go there. An unbelievable man, an unbelievable person to support these Griffins. So shout out to Montana's, shout out to Billy Brown. Let's get into it.
You got to feed the big guys. And hey, this is a 1 o'clock game. We're switching things up a little bit. We figured it would be poetic to end our breakdown with the Mac versus Guelph game. So we'll start off with our other 1 o'clock games. And Tom, we got a big one on our hands. As we said, breaking down week 3, the only thing that could rain on this parade of what we're doing today is the fact that being here means that we can't be in Waterloo checking out the Laurier Golden Hawks hosting the Western Mustangs. Of course, this is a rematch from the Yates Cup last year. 2 undefeated teams, Western at 3-0, Laurier at 2-0. Tom, get this going. Like when we're checking our phones throughout the game, when we're watching this after the fact, when we get home later, what are you most excited about in this matchup?
Well, I'm really excited to see Western with arguably one of their biggest challenges of the year so far. You look at a Laurier squad that's played McMaster a bye week and then gone up against Guelph, 2 really, really good teams, and come out on the other side of it. Western, on the other hand, has played against an Ottawa team that has struggled, certainly, to be generous with things, then has traveled to, well, had Waterloo travel to them and took care of...
We don't need to talk about it.
They took care of business.
Waterloo's on their bye, brother. Leave them alone. Leave them alone.
They took care of business. And then a Carleton squad that we know is a lot better than what they've been showing, but still is trying to find themselves. You know, obviously Elijah Barnes is in there. He's been playing fantastic, but they really took care of business there. This is going to be Western's really first big test against the Laurier Golden Hawks. It's a rematch of the Yates Cup. It's happening in Waterloo, in that beautiful new Laurier field. I'm really excited for this one. It's going to be a fantastic game.
Tom, let's rewind the clock a little bit, because we saw these teams obviously match up in the Yates, but we saw the matchup in week 9, Battle of the Undefeateds, where Western took care of business and certainly let us know about it, because we were picking Laurier on the road to be able to upset them and get home field advantage, and hoping that they would be able to host that Yates that of course ended up being in London. But a game that finished with a final score of 33-30 for Western. A Yates Cup that saw the MVP go to a legend, don't get me wrong, but to Brian Garrity. And you know, when we look at these two teams, like on so many levels, you go quarterback by quarterback, we can look at the run game, we can look at the defenses, multiple levels. They're so well matched up. But when you look at the various matchups in this game, like what are the things, like what's your first thing that's sticking out to you in terms of what you're looking at?
Well, certainly when you look at the defenses for both of these squads, we know that Laurier has such a fantastic defense, but Western's defense this year has really stepped up and come to the plate. They are averaging 300 yards total per game on defense. That's number 1 in U Sports. They're averaging 159 passing yards. That's second in the OUA. They're averaging 142 rushing yards. That's second in the OUA. And they've allowed just 35 points. That's first in the OUA. This is a Western team defense that has been playing absolutely outstanding. 11 turnovers so far in 3 games. I'm really interested to see what are they going to do against a top quality passer in Taylor Elgersma, and especially a stout run game with Tanner Nelms. I'm really excited to see this Western defense continue to flex their muscles here.
And I love you brought up the point of defense, because to me that's the biggest thing when I look at Western this year. I mean, obviously we know about the weapons, and we'll talk about the quarterback for Western a bit, because he might be a little extra jazzed up on this one. We'll talk about why. Oh, is that Coach Mike walking over here?
There it is.
It's a beautiful thing of being live here at Guelph. But again, a defense that might be getting healthy. We didn't see Kojo Odum the last 2 weeks, though we know he's back for Western. We saw him week 1, a beautiful addition, him coming back. We're just happy that he's healthy. And we didn't see Max Nixon either last week.
No.
Oh boy, here comes trouble. Coach.
Coach.
How you doing, guys?
Good
to see you.
Good to see you too.
Good to see you, Coach.
How's it going?
Excellent.
Oh, we're doing all right. You're live on camera here.
Talking a little Laurier Western, Coach. Any insights for that matchup that we have today that you want to share with the folks? I don't know if they'll hear you, but
Well, we'll see if obviously Western's a strong running team.
Yeah.
and Laurier can do both, but it's all about can you stop Western's running game, really.
Yeah.
And of course, Laurier's quarterback, he can go deep, so
He's kind of
should
good.
be a really interesting contest.
It's
pretty good.
Yeah, we're really looking forward to it. It should be a hell of a game. I can't wait to see all of the amazing things that are happening there, but especially with that Western defense. We just talked about it. Number one team in points per game so far, number one team in total defense, and second in passing and in rushing defense. In that, when you saw Laurier, I know obviously you're coaching the offensive line here, but when you saw Laurier's offense, what do you think is really going to be the key here to have them exploit the Western defense?
You got to be able to run the ball.
Gotta have to run the ball.
Yeah,
Have
Be able
to.
to run the ball.
Spoken like a true O-line coach. And we imagine that's what we're going to see your boys do.
If you can't run the ball, then it forces you into an uncomfortable place. Throwing all the time, that allows them to bring pressure, all of those things. Running the ball, it's people creeping up, then you get play action, then you get all that stuff. So today, for us, again, it's the key. We got to be able to run the football.
Absolutely, and you've got the horses to do it. You've got one of, if not the best O-line in the OUA right now with the Guelph Griffins. With some of those guys and how you're playing right now, and Coach Mike back at the helm coaching them up. They're one of the best in the entire league. What's going to be the key strategy for you in order to establish the run against a very good MAC defense?
Well, if I tell you that, I'm going to
Hopefully they're tuning in on YouTube from the locker room right now.
All
But
right. Running the ball is part of our identity. We got to be able to run the ball. We got a senior O-line. All of our running backs are in today, so all of our running backs are back. So we got to be able to run the football. But they're a good team. They got a great quarterback. Their defenses are pressure. They're unorthodox.
Sure.
So you got to be prepared for that. They can catch you. I've always said, I've told you guys many times, penalties and turnovers. When you have two teams that are fairly close, it's penalties and turnovers, and he makes at least a number of mistakes, right?
I hear you, Coach.
Alrighty, the guys feel good, but you think all you want. You got to go out there and play and win.
that's it.
That's it, Coach. Coach,
All right, well, I'll got to go to work, so
good luck to you, Coach.
Best of
welcome.
luck,
Glad
Coach.
to see you here.
Appreciate it.
An incredible surprise. Again, Coach Mike McDonald, offensive line coach for the Guelph Griffins, giving us a bit of insight into what they're expecting in the MAC Guelph game. We'll go back over some of those key points that he was raising when we get into that game.
For sure.
But again, I want to go back to the Western defense because we've seen this be a defense where they've been top amongst the OUA, top amongst U Sports. But the thing that we've talked about, what we've seen is that sometimes even that overall, whether it's points per game or the net yards are still up there at the top. Sometimes the passing yards might be high. We've kind of, prognosticated that, when you go up by 71 points, whatever it was, Waterloo, we love you. We love you so much. Enjoy the bye week. Rest up, fellas. Kind of force teams to pass the ball, go deep on you. So the fact that they're putting up the points they're putting offensively, because again, we got to talk about some of those guys they have on the offense. Coach Mike brought up the run game for them. Mr. Elgersma is he was a little ticked off at some content we put out this week. But again, the fact that their defense is doing what they're doing, not just limiting teams in points, but the yards as well. When they're getting up big, that defense is special right now. And we know it starts with Jackson Finley on the back end captaining that. And again, when you got folks like Richard Abdu before and maybe Kojo Odum returning, that secondary, again, we talk about Ottawa's maybe the top dog. That secondary is for real. Heck of a matchup. But again, number one for the Purple Ponies. Tom, you were spearheading a bit of content that we put out collaborating with our friends of House of CFL.
Yes.
Speak on that, my friend, because you might have, I bet if things don't go well for Laurier, you're going to get an angry text from Coach Galloway and Coach Falls as a result.
Oh, I know. For those of you who follow our social media, you'll have seen it yourself. We collaborated with House of CFL to top the top 10 U Sports quarterbacks in the entire country here. We had our guy, Taylor Elgersma, number 2, and we had number 1 for the Western Mustangs in Evan Hillock at number 5. And let me tell you, he had some things to say to us about that. But in the true competitor that he is, all he said to us was Saturday, 1 o'clock, you'll see who the best quarterback in the OUA is.
Most certainly. And Tom, may I just take a pause on the Western Laurier game? As y'all can likely see, this is filling up behind us. Again, the tailgate here at Alumni Stadium, home of the Guelph Griffins, as good an event before the main event you can have if you're in the Guelph area. If you're tuning in, first of all, thank you so much. You're beautiful. We love you. get on out here. Like, this is spectacular. You're going to get a heck of a game. You heard Coach Mike talk about it a bit already. We'll get into the details. But so we got to go back to this game.
Have to.
Okay, we saw, again, going back to last year in those matchups, another thing that stood out, and we should, for the first time ever, we're actually on a slight time limit in terms of our content, so I got to kind of monitor the clock.
Can't go for 3 hours like we normally do.
But we also saw where, we talked about Evan Hillock, and you have some of the numbers about what he and his, go-to targets like Seth Robertson, not a first-team All-Canadian Seth Robertson.
No, of course not. Of course not.
What they're doing in the passing game, we saw Evan get hurt in that game against Laurier in the playoffs. He's able to come back and lead them to that Yates Cup victory. But we also saw Keon Edwards go down. So again, when we look at those matchups from last year, in some ways we're dealing with a slightly different Western offense. You have some of those numbers about what he's doing. And again, his first year now, ever playing football without Savon Magne-Jones?
I think so. Close to.
The STM connection. Again, Hamilton football, as good as you'll get in the province.
Yes, sir.
You have some of those numbers about what he's doing in the air, and maybe that can help us then talk about Laurier's defense, because we should talk about that too.
We absolutely should. But Evan Hillock so far, 44 for 69 on the year, 64% completion rating, 632 yards in the passing game, and 6 total passing touchdowns, which is number 1 in all of U Sports. They are very dangerous on the ground. Obviously, every single time you talk about Western, you talk about the run game, but Evan Hillock in the past 2 years has established himself as one of the top tier quarterbacks in not only the OUA, but in U Sports in general here, and the numbers reflect that. He's constantly doing some things where you were looking around saying, look at the passing situation, look at the touchdowns here, look at the targets that he's had. Like, this is a Western offense that is prime tuned and ready to go immediately. And you and I were talking about this earlier. They are the back-to-back Yates Cup champions. I think they actually look better this year than they did last year.
Yeah, I think you make a good case. Again, he's only the 5th best player, quarterback in U Sports somehow after those numbers. Yeah, I mean, the funny thing is we have a battle of 2 teams that they're obviously battling for the win on the field, but they're also kind of battling for who has the bigger chip on their shoulder. Because obviously Laurier, they want to prove themselves against Western. For Western, they know that they have ideas of grandeur beyond just the OUA. Well, let me stick on that for 1 second, then let's talk about Laurier's defense. Probably make some picks, because golly, we'll be talking while this game's going on. When we look at these 2 teams, the fact that Laurier already had their bye this year, right? We saw these teams match up week 9, final game of the season. Good job by the schedule makers if that was intentional, recognizing that, hey, we might get undefeated teams in there in London and battling for home field advantage in the 8s. Laurier had that early season bye. We know our guy Jack Moore was all up in your DMs about like us talking about Queens' schedule and Ottawa's schedule. Hey, look, it's a great OUA. Everyone's got a tough schedule. But getting that early bye, we talked about in our earlier podcast, when you're so close off your training camp, for a team that wants to go deep, a veteran team, that's a bit tricky, right? Western hasn't had their bye yet, so from that standpoint of like, can they really sell out to win this game on the road, make a statement, pick up the first road win on that new field? What do you make of it from that standpoint, how these teams have had their byes or not in the case of Western?
Well, certainly in the past couple of years, Laurier has not exactly had ideal bye week scenarios. Last year having the week 1 bye, which is it's just brutal. And in this year getting week 2. And even in between those 2 games, you have a very good, very tough and physical MAC game. And then you go into a bye week, and then you play against another very good, very physical Guelph team, and you go out and you do your thing. Now, obviously, they did their thing. They're 2-0. There's a reason for that, but there's no longer a break in the season for these guys. They are a veteran squad. Not only that, but you and I have been talking about previously, last year in week 3, Laurier came to town. They did their thing against your Griffins, and we don't want to bring that up here, but it took a while for Taylor Elgersman and that offense to really get going here. Taylor's numbers on the year so far, 34 for 47, 72% completion, 459 yards, 1 touchdown, and 2 picks. He's certainly not playing to the capabilities of what we know he can, and I think that that's only going to come in time. But it would be really nice for a veteran team like that to have that bye week later on so that they can focus on, hey, this is what we're seeing, this is what we're noticing, let's get back to form, especially with that passing game. It's got to come together a little bit more. They beat 2 really good teams in Mac and Guelph, don't get me wrong, but if you want to continue this and continue to get better and get to the Yates Cup like Laurier has been trying to, that passing game has got to come alive.
Yeah, and again, as you mentioned, it took a few weeks last year. Maybe we'll see the same thing this year. Again, we know what that defense for Western brings to the table. This defense for Laurier, though, I think really had a great outing against Guelph. We came into that game myself, perhaps a little more bullishly, thinking that Guelph is going to run the ball, and they certainly tried, and they certainly got theirs. Laurier did a great job on that front seven. We've talked about with the losses of Anya Meninum and some of the other key figures on that front seven, Brubaker, that maybe that's where they were going to be susceptible. They shut the door. But again, with this Western team, you shut one door, another door is going to be open for them. You can see the same thing about that Laurier offense. You know, obviously we talked about Elgersma with Ethan Jordan, with obviously what he has in the backfield with Nelms and all the other weapons that he is totally comfortable getting them to under the tutelage of Galloway, and how he gets creative, and how we saw he's got some stones on him.
He's got some stones.
But it's gonna be tough sledding, Tom. If only because I'm cognizant of the time. If there's any main points you have left on that sheet, and I see a lot on that sheet. Speak now or forever hold your peace. Otherwise, I think we got to make some picks in this Yates Cup rematch.
We really do. The last thing that I want to call out is the offensive line play for both of these squads.
Certainly, yeah.
Have to, a former offensive lineman. If we don't call him out, nobody else will. Laurier has given up 4 sacks on the season so far in 2 games. All of those really came against McMaster and a team that was flying around and giving some unorthodox pressures for sure. Western, only 2 sacks so far in this year against 3 opponents, one of them being Carleton and Ifeanyeka. So that is outstanding for this Western Mustangs O-line. We know they're always going to have a solid O-line no matter what, but both of these squads are going to have to come out and play if they want to win in this game. Looking at everything that I see here, we know Laurier is an awesome squad. And I'm going to get into my pick right here. We know that Laurier is an awesome squad. We know the capabilities of a Taylor Elgersma. But that defense from Western comes to play today. Evan Hillock establishes himself, and that run game takes care of business. Western takes this game in Waterloo against Laurier.
And to the point on the O-line, we didn't see Keegan O'Neill playing for Western last week. Again, if he's back, all the more reason to think that O-line is going to be better. Look, Tom, this might be a situation of fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me, because I was heavy on picking Guelph on the road last week, and it was a great game, and maybe folks are going to say Zach didn't learn his lesson, but I'm right there with you. Give me the ponies on the road in a great matchup, though. No matter
100%.
what the outcome is on the scoreboard, this is going to be super exciting. Can't wait to break that one down, see what happens with it. But let's move on, because we have so many places to go to. So from the KW, let's head to the Big Smoke. U of T hosting the Carleton Ravens. Carleton coming to this one at 0-3, U of T at 1-2. But if you play this by the records, you are going to be sorely mistaken as far as what the narrative of this game is, because though I didn't dive into the archives of different 0-3 teams over the years, I'm willing to say this has to be one of the best 0-3 teams that we've had to start a season. We saw them start their season off here at Guelph, and we see Tristan Lefebvre go down. But with that, we see the surgence of young Elijah Barnes, and they lose the heartbreaking game at home against Windsor. Excited to see some Windsor football again this week. That blue-collar gold swagger back on the field. And then, of course, they lose at Western last week, but an impressive outing.
Yes.
Especially on the offensive end, what Elijah Barnes is doing. U of T, a young club, we had him in that winning isn't everything mentality. And as we saw in Mac, the offense slowed down a bit, but still seeing the things that we're liking that can project into the future. Carleton at U of T, what do you make of this?
I love that you brought it up, the surgence of Elijah Barnes.
Yeah.
You and I were coming into this saying Tristan Lefebvre is going to be a top-tier quarterback in the OUA. They're really going to have to rely on him. He goes down against your Griffins in the home opener here, and you and I are going, oh my God, what does this mean for Carleton? Now, obviously, they're still 0-3, so it's not where they want to be, but this is, and you said this perfectly before the show, probably the best 0-3 squad that we have seen in the past few years. This Carleton Raven team is legit. They are averaging 256 yards in passing, which is second in the OUA across all of the amazing passing attacks that we have here. Now, the big thing that's hurting them is the rushing average. 144 is 7th in the OUA so far, and they're averaging about They totaled so far 61 points. So the offense is starting to find their groove a little bit, certainly leaning on the arm of one Elijah Barnes, who is a young kid who's got such potential here, and we're really excited to see him. So Elijah Barnes also, just while I'm talking about him, 50 for 85 on the year so far, 58%, 661 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 2 picks. Not bad for a first-year starter, second-year player out of Hamilton football, baby!
I already gave you your shout out. I'm going to leave you to cover and boost up your boys. And, we knew that going into this year, the strength of that team was in the passing game. We saw it with Tristan Lefebvre last year, and also prognosticating that, we have a head man in Coach Corey Grant, and the success he had in MAC, that 2019 team, how effective they were passing the ball with Andreas Duick. And we saw last year, obviously, Kasim Ferdinand really continue to establish himself as one of the top players, not just in Ontario, in U Sports, first team All-Canadian. We had some thoughts about that.
Certainly did.
But again, well-deserved in many regards, and all the plethora of athletes he has around him, none less than with Tristan Reddy, what he's done this year, just being a go-to guy for Elijah Barnes. And we know that with a young quarterback, obviously having guys like that, having people that he knows that, all right, early in the game, let me get a completion, let me get some of that mojo flowing, let me know that, okay, we're getting into the rhythm of things, that, okay, we can start to build off that. For a young guy, I think that's really important. To me, the first note I had on my sheet, though, when I look at these clubs, and if you're there in Toronto, of course, Varsity Stadium, one of our favorite places to check out a game, 1 o'clock game, assuming the weather's like this, where else would you rather be on a Saturday afternoon in Toronto? Lord knows you can't get very far because the traffic's going to be, what it is. But the amount of speed on this field is going to be bananas. If you're watching this on replay, turn the speed down to maybe 0.8 because when you look at these defenders on the Carleton team, and again, you mentioned Ife Onyeka kind of as that heartbeat of the defense, one of the best pass rushers, overall defensive lineman in the nation. But the host of players around him, and you contrast that with guys like Jake Osteen, like guys like our guy Chris Joseph, who you got some numbers sent your way about just how fast this young man is. And we saw how Coach Kanichis, with a young guy in Caleb O'Donoghue, similar as we said with Elijah Barnes, let's give him some easy completions. If we're facing pressure, let's just give him opportunities to know, okay, get it into your guys' hands, let them make plays. And when these guys, especially guys like Osteen and Joseph, get the ball, and when they have space, going back to that Waterloo game, they make some beautiful things happen. Now, again, you got a really cool message regarding our guy, Chris Joseph.
And shout out to our guy, Anthony Finley, for this. But Chris Joseph was doing some training with him this past season. In the off season here, Chris Joseph ran a 4.35 laser 40-yard dash. This man is fast as all hell. We've seen them, U of T, do a pretty good job of getting him the ball in space and having him make something out of nothing here. He didn't have the biggest game against McMaster, certainly, but we're still starting to see some things here. Chris Joseph in that last game, 6 catches for 125 yards. Jake Osteen, 6 catches for 65 yards, especially with a first-year quarterback, a redshirt freshman, I should say, in Caleb O'Donoghue. That is fantastic to have at least 2 guys that you can confidently find each and every time in the passing game here. So I'm really interested to see where U of T comes to life here. We know Tommy Kanichis is a hell of a coordinator. Let's see if he can find some areas to really take advantage against the Carleton team. But first and foremost, it doesn't matter what you see in the back end, you got to stop Onyeka or else he's going to be in the backfield all day.
Most certainly. And you mentioned Carleton struggles running the ball. We saw last week U of T against a great defense in MAC that we'll be talking about shortly. The offense struggled, but we really didn't see the run game come to life. And so, to me, I'm looking at these 2 clubs. We have right now, and again, just to go through the numbers, 1 through 7, and again, 7 teams making the playoffs. And we're only getting to the 4th week, but we got Western, Laurier, Windsor, Guelph, Queens, Ottawa, MAC at 1 and 2, tied with U of T in that 8th slot. Of course, they have the win, so they have the advantage there. You mentioned Carleton's at 0 and 3. So with that in mind, knowing that MAC and Toronto, they've already played, MAC with that tiebreaker. We'll obviously talk about the significance of this game for MAC at 1 and 2. But for both these clubs, knowing that, okay, if they really want to vie for that last playoff spot, and again, for Carleton, having not played MAC, that's a bit more of a live opportunity for them. Neither of these teams have really got their running game going too effectively thus far. This game is massive. One might even say a must-win at this point for these clubs. with both these teams, where do you see them trying to attack offensively? We like, again, when with Coach Mullen's defense, and you know he's rocking the backwards upside down visor, perhaps the best coach swag in the league, doing his thing, and we saw how effective his defense is at times as well. Offensively, for both these clubs, they struggle in the run game. They seem to have had success in the passing game. This is a major game for both these teams. Where do you see these teams trying to move the ball offensively?
First and foremost, we've talked about a few times now how effective Elijah Barnes has been, but I really would love to see Matthew Morin really start to take advantage of his run game and this capability here. It's gonna be difficult to do so, but certainly if you want to make sure that everything is going well for this Carleton Raven offense, and if you want to really be able to capitalize on some of these important games later on, you're gonna need to run the ball effectively. Matthew Morin, as of last week, 11 attempts, 44 yards, and 1 touchdown against Western. Now that Western defense is damn good, like we've been talking about here. But if you want to really compete in the top tier of the OUA, you have to establish the run wherever you go. So I would really want to see them establish themselves on the ground and get Matthew Morin going a little bit, at least 70, 80 yards, something along those lines. But of course, you know that they're going to come back to Elijah Barnes here. He has been an outstanding get for these guys out of the Hamilton area. Once again, I just want to shout out Hamilton football. But he's really doing some great things in the air and on the ground. We've seen him make solid decisions throughout the game here and finding his All-Canadian in Kasim Ferdinand and Tristan Reddy, who have been fantastic. Now, there's been a couple of times, especially in that Windsor game a couple of weeks ago, we saw some uncharacteristic drops from them, and we're really going to need them to shore up those hands, especially if they want to be able to come away with this one here. But I really like Carleton. Like we said before, this is the best 0-3 team that we've seen in a long time. I'm looking for them to really establish themselves against Toronto here.
Yeah, and of course, you know, we're both speaking very highly of Carleton. Again, this 0-3 team, and they're playing above that record. But we can go back 2 years' time and see a Carleton team that a lot of folks are probably favoring going into Varsity Stadium against a young team with a young quarterback in his first year, that time in Kinsale Phillip, who you can now check out on the opposite side of the ball. One of the leaders in tackles in the whole league right now.
Number 1 leader in solo tackles in the OUA, the former quarterback turned DB, Kinsale Phillip.
Shout out to that young man. But again, as we mentioned, in that iteration of this matchup, we have a favored Carleton team coming to Varsity Stadium. Young U of T team, some good things on that defense for Carleton, a solid quarterback play and passing game in general, and they get beat down in Varsity Stadium. I guess that's probably in the backs of some people's minds. They're different teams. So I'll throw it to you now with that kind of in the air. Where are you going with your pick on this one?
I really like this Toronto team. I like the things that they're doing. I like Coach Kanichis. I like Coach Adams. And what they're doing and what they're building there is going to be special. But it's Carleton. Carleton finally gets their thing going. Elijah Barnes showcases himself. And Onyeka continues to do what he has been doing. Obviously, we know he's an outstanding player. He's got 9.5 total tackles on the year, 3 sacks, which is tied in the OUA for first. But 6 tackles for loss, which is second in the OUA overall in tackles for loss. So he is living in the backfield right now, whether it's a run or a pass. Look to him to really establish himself in this game as the top tier defensive guy to watch out for in the OUA.
And so with that, maybe I missed it, but your pick, you're going?
The Ravens.
You're going Ravens. Yeah, I'm taking the Birds on the road on this one too. Hey, honestly, my big thing for U of T, we've seen how they've gotten creative in the passing game, being able to open up some opportunities to move the ball, going back to that Waterloo game. Maybe that's enough for them to put points up on this game and maybe come up with the win. But again, in the process of thinking process over product, in the spirit of that, let's see how they get creative, getting the ball moving on the run game. Kind of like, and we'll talk about York coming up, the way that the things that we're looking for them to see that might not come in wins necessarily, but we're seeing the development of a philosophy offensively. We know that defense is very consistent, but I'm sticking with Carleton on the road. Now you mentioned Onyeka is tied with 3 sacks. May I take a guess at who he's tied with?
Yeah, go ahead.
Does he wear the tricolors in last name Hubert?
He does indeed.
Well, let's go talk about those Queens Golden Gales because they're playing some football this afternoon. They're in the nation's capital, taking on a team that, you know, I don't know. Have we seen these teams play before? Ottawa Gigi's Queens. Ottawa Gigi's Queens. I feel like sometimes we see odd matchups. Have we seen these teams play before? My Ottawa Gigi's and
yeah, only 7 times since 2021. 3 times in 21, 2 times in 22, and in 23. We have seen these teams play more than any other 2 in the OUA so far.
yeah. And of course, for context, if you're like, how does a team play 3 times in 2021? Again, that was the COVID shortened year where they broke up the league, OUA East, OUA West, both those teams being on the east side of things, then matching up in the playoffs again. Now, when we've seen that matchup over those years, and maybe this is something, nothing, or everything, those matchups have gone a little tighter, right? We've seen, again, this Ottawa team really have a established philosophy consistent, though the pieces have moved, of outstanding defenses with a secondary that is hard to match, really, with any team except for maybe Western this year, and a run game where whether it's JP Simonkinda, whether it's Al McCall-Polk, or whether it's King Charles Asselin, this is a team that's been able to run the ball with the best of them. And, on the theme of running the ball, this is a game that's brought to you by the letter C for both King Charles Asselin and also Jared Kasari. Because though we saw him more limited in that game against York, seen him a little beat up, right? We know that at his best, he's the best in the nation. I'm all over the place on this, but we got Queens and Ottawa, 2 teams majorly familiar, both with great run games and defenses that are both outstanding, but for kind of different reasons. What is your initial read on this one?
So first and foremost, we have to talk about what the elephant in the room is between what you and I both know. And if you can't tell at home, we've got 2 unbelievable camera set up here by our friends in Royal Media. They do outstanding work. But I got to go to this camera here because we've got some breaking news here. We've been talking with a couple of insiders for the Golden Gales football team here. Jared Kasari, our leader in what we thought was going to be the OUA MVP, not dressed for this game. He is out. They're taking a look at his ankle here, so they are not going to have their leading rusher for the Queens Golden Gales. Not to mention that 3 offensive linemen will not be dressing for them, who are regularly starters for this Queens Gales team. Now, we saw Alex Vreeken really finally come to form in the last game against York. 22 for 29, 302 yards, 2 touchdowns and no interceptions, finally coming into form. But you at least had Kasari there to keep that defense honest, to know that, hey, we've got the last year's number 1 rusher in the OUA. You have to respect this year. Kasari being out in this game, traveling to Ottawa without 3 of your starters on that offensive line, this is going to be a completely different game than what a lot of people thought. Riley Hildebrand is a very good defensive lineman. He's going to be in the backfield in Vreeken's face. How he's going to handle that, because while Alex has finally started coming into his own, let's not forget, in the first 2 games this season, Alex Vreeken has thrown 5 interceptions. This is something that we have not seen from this young man in a long time, and I really am expecting him to get back into form, but it's going to be difficult against the OUA's number 1 passing defense in the Ottawa GGs, only allowing 149 passing yards per game. I know I went on a rant there, but my God, I had to get all that out.
No, and hey, we've been saying that all year long, going back a couple years, about this GG secondary. This is a major opportunity for Mr. Alex Vreeken to step up and show. We've been having this conversation for a while now. We know that we have, Taylor Elgersma. We know that we have Evan Hillock sort of at the pinnacle of quarterback play in this province, and it's been somewhat of a revolving door at times. Last year, at times, we thought it was Danny Skelton. You've been pretty bullish and with a lot of good reasons to think it's your guy we're going to see today in Keegan Hall. At times, whether it's Tristan Abood, Marshall McRae have looked like it's that, and it certainly looked like it's Alex Vreeken at times. Hopefully I'm not forgetting any names in that mix. Oh, Lefebvre, when he was, again, right, him going down. Why that was so massive. So a huge opportunity for Alex Vreeken to not only lead his team against an opponent where, again, these 2 teams, they're both at 2-1 right now. Against an opponent where, as you mentioned, he still had Kasari last week to bail him out at times if he needed to. Now, though, we've seen him at his best. We know that his best game is up there with as good a quarterback play. We do that game when we're doing our preseason predictions, best case, worst case scenario, when such and such a team has their best game, and if such and such a team has their worst, who do you like? When this kid's on his best game, with the help of folks like Nathan Falcone, with Nico Cuomo, and when that run game, that helps out too. Coach McDonald talk about that as well. We know that for sure. This kid is outstanding. This is a huge opportunity for himself to pole vault his team into that upper echelon of the OUA against an extraordinarily strong defense, specifically in the secondary, knowing his run game's down. Obviously, the 3-0 lineman piece, we saw them deal with that last week, and obviously the run game, they got outrushed by York by a single point, but noticeable.
Yeah, absolutely.
We took note of that. Again, a little more experience for those 3 guys, that's certainly going to play into it. But we're talking quarterback play right now, and we'll get our way to King Charles because, especially with Kasari going down, there's some statements I'm going to make about King Charles Aslan. We'll get to in a moment. But when we talk about quarterback play, on that guy's best day, we know he's one of the best in the province. The Ottawa GGs, we obviously know Ben Miracle. He's coming off a missed year. But thus far, he's gotten 2 full starts. He missed the first game, the home opener against Western for them. Plays against York, plays against Waterloo, teams that, again, aren't, top echelon teams. Good things on defense. Your guy, Foxy Noxie, my old DC, and Coach Kevin McNeil. But we've really seen him struggle. We know he's got some weapons out there too, not just Aslan, but we know he's got Maxim Melifont, Suleiman Kamara, who we haven't seen that much from. But again, he's got weapons. That O-line's solid. As far as the quarterback play, this is a little slanted. But when we talk about breakout games, do we see Ben Miracle not necessarily blow the doors off of Queens, but finally show that he is still the guy that we know we have seen, that other coaches around this league, when we talk to them and they say, hey, what's going on with Miracle? That they know, again, when he's at his best, he's up there as well. We're talking football, we're talking OUA football. Yeah, Ben Miracle getting it going. And of course, as we've talked about, Coach Mike said it, we know it, you know it at home, that when you have a bell cow, like someone like Charles Aslan, you can hand them the ball off and influence a defense where they're game planning and they know that that's where they need to focus in their efforts. It alleviates some of the pressure for young Ben Miracle. And again, I made a claim, I think, on our last podcast. Apologies again for not doing the Week 4 preview. We saved it all for this one. But I think it was coming off Week 3 that with what he's been doing, top of U Sports leaders in a few categories. I think you have those numbers, so I'll pass it back to you. Kasari again, what he's been doing, what he showed, I have that text to prove it from mid-June when you had told me he was coming back, that he was my favorite for MVP. With him going out, and if Kasari keeps up this production, they steal a couple of these wins. They still obviously have their Panda game with Carleton, a major game where, as we've said, seemingly anything can happen on that game. My concern, my whole thing is that they can get enough wins. Now that we know Kasari's down, obviously Evan Hillock's doing a heck of a job out there, but this young man, is Charles Aslan, is in the MVP conversation, in the way too early MVP conversation talk. But we gotta do it because you got the numbers there. What's this young man doing? King Charles Aslan, we know that he has been the main focal point for that Ottawa offense, kind of by default with the lack of production that we've really seen by Ben Miracle. But he has taken every single advantage and every single opportunity and is running with it, figuratively and literally. When you look at his numbers, he's averaging 163 rushing yards per game. That's first in U Sports. 489 total yards per game. That's first in U Sports. 4 touchdowns on the ground in rushing. That's tied for first in U Sports. This man is taking every opportunity and is really running with things. I really have loved everything that we're seeing from Charles Aslan, not just on the ground. We're seeing him get out into the passing game as well. Just in the last game alone against Waterloo, he finishes with 78 passing yards in the air and the lone touchdowns that they scored on offense as well. I love what we've been seeing from Charles Aslan. You and I were detailing before in the preview podcast, if they really want to take their game to the next level, they have to get this young man integrated into the offense, and they have done that beautifully in making sure that he is the #1 target for this Ottawa GG's team. And I was trying to find the stat while you were reading off all of those beautiful numbers as well. I don't have it in front of me, but I think he's also leading the OUA in just all-purpose yards altogether. So again, this guy's doing incredible things for this squad as we see our guy Jake Fitzchowski. Oh my goodness, Big Jake. How you doing, sir? But I don't even know where I'm at. With this Queens team though, again, when we look at how they're gonna have to rely on Alex Reekin, they don't have Kasari in there to help spell that effort and everything like that. But again, going back to what he did last week against the defense in York that we'll talk about shortly, your guy and Greg Knox calling that up. He goes 22 for 29, 302 in the air, 2 touchdowns, right to the likes of Falcone, to the likes of Nico Cuomo, in not even a full complete game. And this defense, as you mentioned, is spectacular for Ottawa, not just in the passing game. They're second in giving up points per game. So again, well-rounded defense. You mentioned on the front with Hildebrand, they got a guy in Daniel Briere in the middle there. Again, as we talked about, they are able to cycle running back seemingly at will. They've been so consistent in filling that middle linebacker spot from James Peter to Max Carbonneau to now with this guy in Daniel Briere who's been with the system. A good defense. But with Alex Freakin, again, this is what comes down to. Tom, I'll give it to you for any last talking points you have on this one before we get into some picks.
Listen, we talked a little bit about that Ottawa defense. You and I have been talking since week 1 with the defensive secondary that they have. That might be the best defensive secondary in the OUA right now, with guys like Denny Ferdinand, the brothers Cumberbatch, and everybody that's really doing their thing out there, which is insane because you think about they lost Harnur Dhaliwal, and they're still at the top of that list here. So really interested to see what they can do here. In defense in general, they're averaging giving up 323 yards of offense. That's second in the OUA, so this defense is really good. 149 yards in the passing game, like I mentioned, that's first in the OUA, and 174 rushing yards is third last in the OUA.
And this is a team who did have to play Western already. Yes, we can say they played York, they played Waterloo. They've had to have that Western game. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, absolutely. That's absolutely something you need to look into. And remember, a lot of these averages here really depend on who you're playing against, so I love that you brought that up. You look at all of the injuries that are on this Queens offense, you look at what that Ottawa defense has really been able to do here, and I'm really excited for this one. But I'm going with the Golden Gales. I think Alex Freakin continues his route in the air. He established himself. He continues to showcase what he is capable to do. Even with Kasari out, even with those 3 offensive linemen out, he does his thing. They take care of business. And Queens gets program history in completing 500 program wins in all of Queens history. I'm going with the Golden Gales.
That's pretty cool. You know what? You told me that information about Kasari, the O-line being banged up. I mean, that's got to sway folks' opinion on this one. I've certainly staked my claim as an Ottawa GG fan from afar. I love what Coach Belfay's been doing there with that program year in, year out. We love what these guys are doing. Charles Asselin, again, looking like an MVP candidate. But again, with what we saw Alex Freakin doing, yes, they're going to Ottawa. We know they've had this team's number. More matchups against one another than any 2 clubs have faced off, and it's not even close. I think it'll be a tight beat-em-up matchup. That's what we've seen in the recent games for these 2 clubs. But yeah, I'm with you right there. Golden Gales on the road. Tom, so far we're going road dogs on this one. And let's take that into our next matchup, the afternoon game, the 4 o'clock game, I should say. The Windsor Lancers with their blue-collar gold swagger coming off the bye, off that amazing game-winning field goal against the Carleton Ravens that was kicked from midfield. It was kicked from midfield.
If only we had a number somewhere set up that could showcase where it got kicked from.
Oh, wait.
Oh, wait, we do. It's at the 55, and at the 55-yard field goal to win the game. It's like it writes itself, honestly.
Yeah, I know, right? It's like we're the ones pulling the strings on this OUA season. Maybe we are. Who knows? But they're coming off the bye, off an emotional victory. And we talked about that outing as, you know, it's not just emotional in the way it ended. It's emotional, too, from the standpoint of this is a team that goes into the season with Danny Skelton having finished last year getting benched for a first-year player, Nick Domofsky. They have a tough game against Carleton. They're hosting Carleton in the quarterfinals. They eke that one out, and then they have a heartbreaking loss in Waterloo against Laurier in the semifinals where this young man, Nick Domofsky, is showing some great things. They come back out, open the season. It's Danny Skelton again, a guy who, again, at his peak last year, we're saying he's in that top 3 conversation. Then against Carleton, and you already mentioned how the Carleton receivers struggled a bit in that game. Well, there was a bit of rain going on there.
Yes.
But nonetheless, JP, the Don Cercelli, Coach Cercelli says, you know what? You're not getting it done for me. I'm putting in this young man who we weren't even familiar with, in Corson Roy, who, again, does some good things. I don't know what to make of the quarterback play on that one, but an emotional victory on multiple fronts. Again, a reason why, though we talk about how the early season bye is sometimes a detriment, I think this Windsor team, it couldn't have come at a better time given what was going on. We'll get to York in a second because obviously we like what we've seen from them. This New York Lions team, York Lions team under the tutelage of Coach Dexter Janke. But Windsor's in an interesting situation right now coming off the bye. They're on the road in Toronto. What do you make of it from their standpoint?
While we have seen Windsor come out with 2 really impressive victories so far and earn that bye week most definitely, I'm still looking at them to say, establish yourself. And I know that's ridiculous in the fact that they are 2-0 against 2 very good teams and going into an undefeated part, but establish yourself. Obviously, we know that Danny Skelton has not been playing to what we think that he has. On the year so far, 18 for 33, 54% completion percentage, 182 yards in the air, 2 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. Certainly not where you want this young man to be, but he's got the potential. We certainly saw it in the first half of last year. But regardless, in both last year and this year so far now, he's been benched 2 times, and for 2 different quarterbacks. Corson Roy certainly got the job done against Carleton. They were doing some great things with him for sure, but what does that say to your quarterback room? And certainly to Danny Skelton. And now even if he does come out as a starter this week, after a productive bye week that I'm sure they had, is he now in his head that if I make a mistake, if I do something here that I'm not supposed to, do I get pulled out? Does that put extra emphasis on who you are as well? So I'm really interested to see who comes out as the leading man here for the Windsor offense. What do you got to say?
I'm just chuckling because in some ways, could you frame it as being like, well, you know what, Tom? He has experience getting benched and then getting put back in, so he's used to dealing with that adversity. Sorry, my apologies. Keep going. Love you, Danny.
But we obviously know that the rushing attack for Windsor is something you have to be looking out for. Christopher John, Joey Zord, Wegby Mumbo, that's a 3-headed monster you do not want to be dealing with in the best of scenarios here, but you're going to have to if you play against this Windsor team. So I really like what they're doing here, but defensively. Yeah. We know that typically it takes offenses a little bit more time to really get going here. Claudia Moosen, leading sack leader last year, has yet to record his first sack of the season so far, which is a shocker on that Windsor defense that is outstanding. Now, obviously, Kaladi, ultimately a team player. He's going to make sure that as long as they're winning, he's happy with it. But I really want to see him get back to form and disrupting guys in the backfield. Now, just because he doesn't have a sack doesn't mean that he's not in the backfield disrupting plays, but finish those plays, get back there. The loss of Mufta Ageli here is going to be is still a massive part of this. While they have a solid rotation of defensive linemen in there, Mufta demanded a double team every single time he had because he was so big, so strong, and he was able to bull rush a lot of guys and get sacks on his own as a one tech. And somebody who's typically getting double teamed, and even if he gets through that, there's a running back who could be there hitting him as well. So 3 guys, for him to still disrupt all of that was outstanding. They've got solid guys to replace him, but they're not Mufta. And so with his loss there, does that put a little bit more pressure on Claudia Moosen to really get things going? Obviously, we haven't seen him get that really going as of yet. I want to see him establish himself. I want to see that defense really come into form. Even when you look on the year so far for this Windsor defense, 355 total yards they've given up. That's 3rd in the OUA. 206 passing yards averaging. That's 3rd. 149 rushing yards. That's 4th. 4 interceptions, 1 fumble, 2 sacks, but none of them Claudia Moosen. So solid numbers to be sure, but this is a Windsor-Lancer team that was the #1 defense in the OUA just last year. Establish yourselves, Windsor. Get back to form offensively and defensively. Let's see it.
Yeah, there's a reason we call them Mufta, heck out of my way, Ageli, because he parted O-lines like the Red Sea, and of course it made everything easier for that defense, but nonetheless, under the coaching of Patrick Donovan, again, we are so spoiled with not only great talent on the field, but on the sidelines, coaching these young folks up. And in this game, again, an incredible matchup of defensive coordinators. But Patrick Donovan and the folks he has to be able to put on that chessboard and put them in place to succeed. Yeah, we know what Kaladi can do, and obviously that D-line on the front end takes a bit of a hit in losing Mufta Ageli, but they got guys like Devin Vriesek and Anthony John and Jason Rashatzi, the young kid, who again, sometimes he plays so aggressive, he catches a few penalties, which is unfortunately not uncommon at times for this Windsor games, for this Windsor team. A guy like Brenton McDougall, and you mentioned the interceptions. Robert Springer with the no-fly zone because he's picking off balls left, right, and center in that secondary. So let's introduce the York side of things on this, because we've been talking about however long we're talking about Windsor, and we love Windsor football. They're one of the most exciting teams in the OUA right now on all aspects of the ball. We didn't even mention what Javoni Cunningham does when he's returning balls, or whether it's our guy, whether it's our guy Liam Talbot returning balls for them as well. How dynamic they are on the special teams end. But with this York Lions team, obviously we put them in that category of winning isn't everything. Because new head coach, a lot of new faces, those West Shore Rebels leaving the CJFL out west and joining their head coach. And again, speaking to the caliber of coach that Coach Janke is, that tells you something. Of course, his younger brother and Dexter Janke, a Russ Jackson Award winner, OUA All-Star for the York Lions in the last decade. And we're starting to see pieces of that culture, whether it's the aspect of him saying they're not putting the logo on the helmet until they get their 2 wins, but also what we saw against the York Lions team, against that Queens Golden Gales team last week, where, again, it sounds like I'm taking a shot at them, but the statement of when they're on offense, there's some flow to it. There's what looks like some competency, right? They're getting the ball moving. They have this young guy in Matt Lynn, and he has a plethora of weapons out there to be able to get the ball out. We've obviously seen year after year what Alfred Olay does returning the ball. Clearly we know he's an athlete. They did an excellent job last week in Kingston saying, just get the ball in his hands and let him do work. You know, with Coach Rick Walters calling up this offense, other guys like Avonte McCoy, Cairo Berry, who we were really big on at that game in York against Ottawa, and guys like Avery Ford. Seeing again, like we said with U of T, seeing the creativity, knowing that from where you are right now, because again, in the trenches, that's where, you know, that's the big thing, right? And they're probably not there to compete with a team like Windsor just on the line, or the Westerns, or the Guelphs, or the I was about to say Mac, but maybe I don't feel that way about Mac. But when you can't compete in that realm where you can just say, you know what, like Western always does, we're just going to play our power G offense, we're going to play our standard defense and just say, go ahead, try to beat us. When you can't necessarily just play that beat 'em up football, you got to get a little more creative. We've seen Coach Walters do that, and I think no better than in that game against Queens, one of the best defenses, as we've already highlighted. What are you looking to see from Matt Lynn with Coach Walters offensively? With some of these guys, we've started to see him develop a talent with. The run game's still not there yet. But what are you looking for York offensively against one of the best defenses in the nation?
We've finally started to see some, I don't want to say some production because we saw a little bit of that in York's home opener here, but against the Queens Gales that we really thought the world of, Matt Lynn finishes, if I can find my notes here, 16 for 34, 294 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, finally establishing himself a little bit in the passing game here. Alfred Olay, 5 catches, 124 yards and a touchdown. Avonte McCoy, 3 catches for 71. This passing game is really starting to come alive a little bit. And for a York team to score 21 points against a very good Queens team, that's really saying something here. And we're starting to see them come alive a little bit more. Now, certainly there's a lot of things to clean up on this York team. We've seen them do some things, some really great things, but then there's things like, hey, there's a loose fumble drop, or there's a procedure penalty, or there's too many men in the huddle. Yeah. There's a lot of little things that they still need to clean up, and that's going to come. Let's remember, with all those West Shore Rebel guys and all of the new coaches, this is a brand new team. This is not the continuity that we're continually seeing from a standard team, certainly like a Laurier Golden Hawks, that returns their entire offense. This is a brand new team. They're still finding their mesh. They're still finding themselves here, but look for them to get better and better each and every single week, probably just because of purely where York started and that trying to find themselves. I would argue that this team is probably going to take the biggest jumps in terms of improvement week by week amongst all of the teams in the OUA right now. I really like what I've seen from that passing game so far, but still, Malchus Alunga, I want to see him get going here. 9 attempts for 40 yards. Now, once again, it's a Queens defense. We know it's very good. I just shouted out some of the numbers previously that maybe showcases some other issues that they have, but that D-line, I'd still saying, is one of, if not the best in the OUA right now. I want to see Malchus Alunga get a little bit more involved in this offense, get him established on the run game, whether that's outside zone, whether that's in the passing game as well. He's an absolute threat anytime he touches the ball, and we need to see that a little bit more from this York team. That defense that we've been seeing has been doing really well so far. York averaging 397 total yards.
You're live on YouTube right now, brother.
We're seeing everybody out in this game. This is a massive one. We're seeing a ton of people here. If you're in the Guelph area or in the surrounding area, you got to get down here. This is the best tailgate. This is the best atmosphere. Get down here. Anyways, back to York team. 228 yards passing, which is 7th in the OUA. 169 rushing, which is 8th. No turnovers so far and no sacks for this York defense. Now, you've played against the Coach Knox defense, and you know that typically they're really good at getting sacks and getting turnovers. That was certainly the MO when he was at McMaster when I had the chance to play with them. So the fact that that's not there yet means that there's another layer to this York defense that needs to come alive. It hasn't as of yet, but trust that it will. Foxy Knoxy always says, trust the process. I've got something cooked up for these guys. That's going to come. They're going to see some production. They're going to see some good things, but you have to stick to the game plan and keep rolling and keep going here. I like York. I like the atmosphere, and I love I love the attitude that Coach Janke has brought to that team. You can hear it when you talk to folks in the stands, how excited they are that their kid has gone to this team with a head coach that they can truly believe in. I think great things are on the horizon for York, but it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of effort.
Now, did Coach Knox trademark trust the process like Coach Belfay trademarked? It is what it is. Apparently, he invented that expression. Anyways, a fun story from a person who formerly worked with Coach Belfay. But here's my biggest thing. You talk about Knox, and again, in the trenches, we know that they still need to improve there, right? We obviously know that, again, that's perhaps where that next layer of growth, with the things they're showing on the field this year, what they can do in the recruiting game to build off of that, it's going to be huge for them. But we saw this team with Coach Knox go into Kingston last week, and you just know that Coach Knox, and if anything else, because again, it wasn't just me dealing with him on that O-line, it was our guy Matt Nesbitt calling up plays with.
Absolutely.
And you could tell that Knox probably went into that one saying, if I do one thing today, I'm shutting down the thing they do best, which we know with Jared Cassar in the backfield, though he was injured, and with that O-line, though they were injured, it certainly looked like the game plan is, hey, I don't care if I win today, I'm going to prove I can shut down their run game. And again, they walked out of that game, though it was only 1 rushing yard. I would not have staked my life savings to think that in a matchup of Queens-York in the 2024, that York would outrush them.
Yes.
They did. I don't care if it was 1 yard. And we look at this matchup, I see a lot of similarities because with Windsor, again, a quarterback who we've seen really good things from with Danny Skelton. Same with Freakin. Freakin obviously was banged up last year. It's a bit of a different thing than Skelton when he missed time and so on and so forth. But great defenses, great rushing attacks. I'm guessing Knox is going to take the similar approach. He's at home, which then makes me want to just go back to the Windsor piece of things to then ask, if you're Windsor, because you know you were this close to being in a Yates Cup last year with a rookie quarterback, you're dueling it out with the OUA MVP and the Laurier Golden Hawks in their barn with a trip to the Yates Cup on the line, and you come this short, you know that you can't just say, hey, look, we'll have a good season, it is what it is, and that's not how the Don coach Selly operates, right? So offensively, if it is going to be the situation where York comes in saying we shut down the run game. We saw Carleton actually stifle the run game a bit to start that matchup. They kept with it, and eventually they hit pay dirt. Are they going to take that same philosophy, or are they going to say, you know what, a bit of a weaker opponent in York than Carleton, maybe giving them some leeway to play around with some things from them, knowing that again, they'll probably pick up this win. I think that's where we're going with it. Spoilers, my apologies, but they need to be able to use this game to get better, not just pick up a win. The bye week is gone. They don't have that ability to make major adjustments. What do you want to see from them offensively?
When you look at a Coach Knox defense, absolutely what he's going to do is he's going to look at your strength and he's going to take that away. That's what he does. That's what he's going to train his defense to do. We saw that certainly in his McMaster days for sure, but he's going to look at this Windsor offense. He's going to see the inconsistencies at quarterback, and he's going to say, we're going to stop the run. Joey Zorn, Wegby Mumble, Christopher John, you are not going to rush all over us. We're going to stop the run. We're going to force whoever is in the backfield to beat us. Now, certainly, Corson Roy or Danny Skelton, if they're playing their best game, I truly believe that they might be able to do that. And I truly believe that they might. It's certainly a way to say that, but that's how I feel. Coach Knox and that York defense are going to come in there with the knowledge that we're going to stop the run no matter what. Windsor, come into this game knowing that they're going to do everything they can to stop the run and run the damn ball anyways. Establish yourself. Use those 3 horses that you have as running backs who are hit like offensive linemen at times. Use them, abuse them. Make sure that you establish yourself as the top-tier rushing attack in the OUA. You certainly have the bodies to do so. This is your chance to come out and really do your thing here. That's what I want Windsor to really say. We know what York is going to do to us. We know that they're going to take away the run. We know that they're going to run blitz. We that they're going to load up the box. Do it anyways. That's what I want to see from Windsor.
I love it. I love it. It's just saying that we know what you know what we're going to do. We know that you know what we're going to do, and we're going to do it anyways. Again, that's kind of that Western mentality that makes them so lethal, not just on the field, but that almost psychological aspect of it. Tom, I kind of gave the pick away already. I love Windsor off the bye, picking up the win on the road, the gold, the blue collar, the gold swagger. And however it manifests offensively, that defense is just too potent. York's still figuring themselves out offensively. Again, I love what we're seeing with Coach Janke and his team, but they're not there yet. I'm excited to see what wrinkles they add in, both offensively and defensively, but give me Windsor on the road.
Yeah, I really love everything that I've seen for this Windsor team. I want to see more consistency at quarterback, and I'm sure Windsor does as well. And I'm sure that the JP coach, Don Selling, he's going to have his boys ready to go. They're going to be fired up. Blue collar, gold swagger. We already talked about it. Probably the best saying, line, attitude that you could possibly have in the OUA. I like Windsor in this one. I think they take care of business. They continue to establish themselves, and they answer a lot of questions for us. Because like I said, I don't think that defense is playing up to its capabilities as of yet. And certainly that quarterback play is not where I think it needs to be as of yet. Establish yourselves. Understand that this is Windsor football. The road ends. The Highway 401 ends in Windsor. It ends at the Golden Arches. Establish yourself and host. If you can have the playoffs run through Windsor,
no one wants to play there.
Nobody wants to play down. Establish yourself, Windsor. They take care of business.
Tom, Windsor at York, though the last game of the day, is not our last game to discuss because we are here in the Royal City, Guelph, Ontario, outside Alumni Stadium in the parking lot, home of the best tailgate party this side of the Atlantic. Who knows what they got going on the other side? But it's a great scene right here. You can see it in the background. If you're in the area, you can probably smell it and hear it. Get yourself down here. We are less than an hour from kickoff, not just for Mac at Guelph. Tom, we are here. We're doing our Game Day Live for, what is it now officially?
This is the At the 55 Bowl.
Hell yeah, brother.
We've heard about the Battle of Highway 6. We've heard about everything else. This is the At the 55 Bowl. We are taking this over. This is a rivalry game. We know that this is going to be outstanding.
Yeah, of course, we know there's so many great geographical rivalries in the OUA. We know that there's the Battle of Waterloo with Laurier and Waterloo. We know there's the Panda game with Ottawa and with Carleton. We know there's the Argo Cup, the Red and Blue Bowl, the Battle of Toronto with York and with the U of T Blues. For folks who don't know, this is a geographical battle. You take the trip down or up Highway 6, depending on where you're starting from. You end up about 40 minutes or so in the opponent's nest. And we are here, not just for the game, but in celebrating of Guelph unveiling their wall of honor. You see it as you walk into the stadium. We've got a glimpse of it already. It looks beautiful, honoring both football players and support staff from over the decades. And you and I know, and we have our helmets. Yours a little more banged up than mine, not because I wasn't on the field. This was only played in one game, 2014, the home opener against U of T for the 50th anniversary. That in that time period, there was a lot of bad blood between these two clubs. We've seen some of the Guelph alumni in the house, and I'm certain they know it as well. Tom, before we dive into this game specifically of what we have on the field, and we know what we have is a great matchup. What do you need to tell people about this rivalry that they might not know? And I didn't even mention Queens and Western, though not geographical, a historical rivalry. From your vantage point, talk about what this rivalry means to you and your alumni from the Marauder side of things.
Certainly when you think about when you and I played, there was a lot of battles that we had. We had them with Western. We had a lot of close games with a bunch of other teams. But even though Western was certainly the team to beat, always kind of in that upper echelon and the majority of the years, it's called Western Week for a particular reason. Western Week, everybody knows you're coming up. It's the game of the week. It's your most important game. You got to get hyped for it. But in that setting, it's always something that you know is going to be a big one. Mac Guelph, certainly when you and I played, this was something that you circled on the calendar that you were looking forward to from day one. Training camp starts and opens up, and you go, we got Guelph in week 3, week 4, week 5, whatever it is. We got to be ready for it because we're coming to town or they're coming to us, and it's going to be a bloodbath. Each and every single one of those games was decided by a close margin. There was never a blowout game that happened there, and regardless of who won, Mac certainly had our fair share, sure. But those were some of the most physical games that I had ever played in. When you think about some of the defenses that Guelph had with guys like John Rush, with guys like George Gorilovich, thank you.
Curtis Newton.
Curtis Newton.
Yeah.
All of those outstanding players, they are going to hit you in the mouth for 60 minutes and really going to test you. How well do you know your offense? How well do you think that you can run the ball on us? Because we're going to test you every single step of the way. There was never any quit. There was never any get up. There's never a point in time where we're like, okay, it's the third quarter, we got him now. Never. Guelph always came to play, kicking, clawing, and scratching, and so did we. And that's what I always got excited for. Whether you're playing in the Royal City in here or you're playing in the Hammer, these were must-watch games. I don't care who else is playing. If Mac and Guelph are playing, I'm watching that game because it's a rivalry game that is so important at the 55 ball and that Battle of Highway 6. This is an outstanding game and an outstanding atmosphere.
Yeah, and you know what? So many of those seasons where the two in particular in 2012 and 2014 where we ended the season in Hamilton, but we opened the season in Hamilton as well, and it just felt so poetic. And just as a little inside baseball from our conversations over the years, the thing that I always loved is how you talk about some of your fondest memories of playing games in here, the crowd on the hill being packed in, and just all the nonsense that comes with that. But I throw it right back to you. Enda McMaster playing in Hamilton was always so exciting. The way they just pack the house at Ron Joyce, the in-game entertainment, the way they try and get in your head and mess with you. It really felt like being like a professional athlete at times, of that feeling of being on the road, being enemy number one, and it was outstanding. Tom, we got a ball game on our hands today, and we have two clubs right now. Guelph coming in this one at 2-1, falling just short to Laurier in that huge matchup last week in Waterloo. Some bozo picked them to win on the road, but we'll move past that. And Mac picking up their first win of the season at home, a game we were in the stands for, or weren't in the stands for, we were on the sidelines for. Yep. Picking up their first win against U of T. But much like we said with Carleton, the standings can be deceiving if you're just checking your OUA football standings week in, week out. This is a MAC team that, I'll throw it to you on this. Though obviously the more teams that are strong and effective in the OUA, the better the overall product. But now that I'm back in on my Guelph Griffins, your Guelph Griffins, everyone's Guelph Griffins, this MAC team scares me a little bit with what they do defensively that we knew about, but how this offense still, it takes a little time sometimes, but with that ball in Keegan Hall's hands, my goodness, do they do some incredible things.
Yeah, and we heard Coach Mike talk about it as he first joined the podcast here, is that the MAC defense is unorthodox. Scott Brady, what he brings to this team, we talked about it a little bit previously. There's not one player on that McMaster defense that's really going to wow you in certain spaces. Obviously, they've got studs like Carter Blatt and Drake Bodie and all of these guys. But the way that they're really going to do this is by a system play. They're going to play solid team defense and really going to try to disrupt things as it happens. Now, they've got arguably one of the, if not the biggest test here, certainly on the run game that Guelph has the opportunity for. We've heard that every single running back for Guelph is healthy and ready to go in this one, which is a very dangerous thing for any team, certainly for this MAC team as well. But I've really loved everything that I've seen here so far. They're averaging 208 passing yards, 161 rushing. The big thing here that I wanted to call out, this McMaster defense, number one in the OUA in sacks and number two in U Sports. 8 sacks on the season so far. And that's from sending extra pressure. That's from blitzing guys at unexpected times. Drake Bodie has certainly come out and been a leader for this team. And they've really got to the quarterback well. But my God, is this going to be a very tough matchup, and what an unbelievable challenge for this defense.
Yeah, maybe, after the live stream, we might have to take the video, take the audio, and splice in you also calling Guelph's O-line the best in the nation. So, I want you to be keeping that in mind when you talk about that defense. But they are a strong defense. But we knew that about this team. And on the back end, we see this young guy in Shimbalonga really come on the scene. They know they have a leader in Josh Cumber there as well, holding it down. Mitch Price on the front end. It's a good defense. And yeah, with Coach Brady, the things they do, and a real just screw you attitude. They're a tough group of guys to have to go up against. I want to stick with them though, and you mentioned the run game, and I had in my notes, is Donovan Malloy going to be back? Because obviously seeing Isaiah Smith back last week, the first week back, I think he'll only be that much better this week, but he wasn't stellar. He wasn't what we know he can do.
Sure. Having
Malloy there, we know what Caleb Sargent's shown this year. That run game's amazing, but with this MAC offense, again, we said they're a little
Jekyll and Hyde at times.
For sure.
And we saw week 1 against Laurier. And again, this kind of emboldened my pick in picking Guelph against Laurier. That run game with Braden Kelly really starting to do some things that we hadn't seen them do last year, and we certainly didn't expect them to do against the likes of a Laurier defense. On the whole, though, it's a MAC offense where, leading the province and maybe the nation. I know you have more than U Sports in terms of passing. Your guy Keegan Hall,
yes sir,
he was on that top U Sport list as well. I'll let you speak on him. He's your guy, and proudly so. That kid is an absolute phenomenal athlete and overall young man. But again, aside from that first game, we haven't seen the run game going, and that's a bit of a repeated history thing from them. So when we look at the effectiveness of this passing game, and we're seeing James Priestner get his first touchdown, we're seeing the Jackson 2, your guys over there, and we're seeing guys like Everett Reed, we're seeing I'm forgetting his name again. I'm somehow
Nicholas Adair.
Nicholas Adair. My apologies to the Adair family out there. I keep forgetting his name. But again, part of that philosophy offensively, where they all get to eat offensively. How much we've kind of talked about some of the other teams, how much they're leaning on Keegan Hall of a product of that being, you know what, this kid's one of the best in the country, and he certainly is. But how much of that as well as saying, hey, we want to be winning games. We know teams expect us. Everyone is, wrinkles their brow a little bit when they see us not making playoffs year after year. We got to win games, and for us, that means that we are putting the ball in our best players' hands. But again, with that Windsor conversation, that Queens conversation, when we know it's a little slanted one way or the other on the offense, how much of Keegan's success, and he's still getting it done, I'm not taking that away from him, but is them saying offensively, look, we want to win games. We know we have to pass the ball. The rushing game still isn't quite there yet. What do you make of it from that standpoint?
I certainly think that they need to do a better job rushing the ball, 100%. But in doing research for this game and really taking a look at the entirety of this McMaster offense that we've seen so far, last week they take care of business against Toronto. Keegan Hall finishes 22 for 32, 294 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's certainly impressive. He throws the ball to 10 different targets on that McMaster team. So yes, while certainly they need to get the run game going a little bit more, and that's certainly been something that they haven't been able to do in the last couple of years, that passing game has really been coming alive here. Keegan is fantastic at just finding the open player, open receiver. You and I both have really high hopes and really high opinions of one James Priestner, and the receiver for McMaster. Last week was his first ever receiving touchdown. So this is absolutely something that we are expecting to see. We're really expecting to see some outstanding play here from this McMaster offense, and in particular Keegan Hall. You mentioned it. He is the #1 passing passer in all of youth sports right now. He has established himself as one of the top tier in the OUA. And like I said, he is top 3 in the OUA certainly here. I really like what I've seen from this McMaster offense, but certainly I want to see Braden Kelly be a little bit more part of it. We saw him come alive a little bit against Laurier, which is a very good defense. I was hoping to see a little bit more against Toronto. Let's see what they can do on the ground, although this is a hell of a test in order to do so.
It's a hell of a test for them to deal with Guelph's defense, but even more so, as all those things we talked about, Mac's defense, Guelph offensively, they're first in yards in the OUA, third in the pass game, second in the rush game, and again, a rush game that we only expect to get better now with a healthy Donovan Malloy, with a improving Isaiah Smith as he's getting his football legs back underneath him, those tree trunks of legs that he gets to walk and run people over with. But again, a team that didn't leave Laurier, they took the L, but also a little dinged up. We saw Marshall McCray, he took a bit of a spill, he came back in the game, but obviously we know he's a little dinged up. He obviously is still able to come back in that game, but what he does as a dual threat quarterback is obviously what makes him so special and opens up so many things on this team. We also didn't see Willem Arsenault. We got a chance to catch up with receivers coach Alex Charette, another former teammate of mine from our days here, and he kept it under wraps, kind of cryptic about what Willem Arsenault's status was. I think I saw someone with an Arsenault jersey walking around here. If he comes back, we might need to grab him and ask him the status was, I don't know, if it was Pops or whomever that was, to get the inside on that. But even taking that into account, and we saw, if you didn't see the face behind the sign, we saw the leave your mark. We talked about how much we love blue collar gold swagger, Guelph's slogan, their logo, their emblem, whatever you want to call it for the year, leave your mark. Head coach Mark Soria, what he's doing not only as a leader, but on the offensive side of the ball. We brought this up the other day, though he was by title offensive coordinator in the past with this team, he wasn't really allowed to get off the leash and just go be the mad scientist that not only we're referring to him as, but folks that we're talking about left, right, and center around the OUA are calling him. With the weapons he has, I am just so excited to see week after week. We talk about this with York and all these other clubs that are kind of finding their identity and how we're going to see new things week after week. This is a club that I expect no difference from. We've seen some great things, but we're going to see some stuff today we haven't seen yet from this team. We talked about how cool that Marshall McCray option game was that they were throwing out last week against Laurier. I think it's only going to become more spectacular. Tom, this offense for the Guelph Grimps is one of the best in the province, one of the best in the country, and only getting better. Yes, I like this Mac defense. They kept me up last night with some night terrors, along with thinking of that Greg Knox defense. but this offense is truly something special.
So we talked about the unbelievable capabilities of the running game that's here, certainly with Ottawa being the #1 rushing attack in the OUA. #2 in the OUA is the Guelph Griffins, averaging 240 rushing yards per game here. This is a Guelph squad that knows how to run the ball. They've got 5 different options to do so that they certainly should know how to, including their 2 quarterbacks, who are just as dangerous as a lot of the running backs here. I think Isaiah Smith gets a little bit more comfortable. We certainly saw him with a little bit of apprehension in the last game. I think he gets a little bit more comfortable in the things that he's doing here, and he establishes himself a little bit more. But Donovan Malloy and Caleb Sargent carry the team for the most part on the ground. In the passing game, 241 yards, averaging 3rd in the OUA, and 109 points so far. That's 2nd in the OUA. This is a very potent Guelph offense that if you do not have a response for them, they are going to torture you, and they're going to torture you very fast. We saw Laurier defense that is very stout and very good struggle at times against a very good Griffin offense. And not to mention, we detailed it before, but what's going on, my guy? Good, buddy. How are you? You're on YouTube right now.
Oh, hey.
Former starting quarterback, Vanier Cup champion Marshall Ferguson in the building. But so we're going through and we're looking at this Griffin offense. We watched them against Laurier, and we looked at the kicking capabilities that Laurier has, and Dawson Hodge and pinning Guelph deep 2 times, driving the entire length of the field against a very good Laurier defense and scoring. This is a team that can put together drives, that can rely on an unbelievable offensive line to really establish himself here, and you have to account for the quarterback play. It's not good enough just to say, oh, Marshall McRae is going to be the runner and Tristan Abreu is going to pass. Either one of them can pass and throw. You have to account for them in this game.
Yeah, and obviously Tristan Abreu, what he's seen as the more traditional pocket passer for this Guelph team, going back to the Laurier game, 19 for 29, 201 in the air, the 1 touchdown, no interceptions. He makes some hay with his feet with 6 carries and a touchdown on the ground as well, showing his athleticism. Really a well-rounded athlete. A couple missed balls, but there was a lot of weather that day. We're here on a near perfect weather day. Really excited to see what he can make happen. And yes, I love just philosophically what we talked about, of them being able to start under the shadows of their own goalposts, driving the field. And as we talked about, a game where they were trading punches with Laurier. A game where if one of those drives ended in an extra 2 and out here or 2 and out there, they obviously lost, but it's a much different ball game. It's making my pick, though I was incorrect, looking that much more foolish in the eyes of folks. They were responding to punches. That was a true heavyweight matchup that us and a lot of folks in that area were kept saying we want to see the rematch of. But in addition, it was really nice to see finally the Vashon Janusis game.
Yes.
That man gets 7 receptions, 80 yards, doesn't find his way into the end zone, but we know that if you're just going talent for talent, like we love what they got with guys like Gerard Tessier, Jacob Thomas, Kane Stevenson, Ryle Ogilvie, and again, like I said, no Willem Arsenault in that game either, but a plethora of options. But if you're going to go pound for pound, who is the top dog, the guy, if it's winning time and you want the ball in one of your weapons' hands that isn't handing the ball off to a running back, it's Vashon Janusis. We know he's capable of. We're starting to see him come alive. Another boon for this passing attack for Guelph that, again, top in the province. Something we don't often get to talk about with Guelph Griffin football.
Yes, sir.
We like to run the ball. We play defense, and our special forces are outstanding. We are passing the ball. It's all the reason why we can be so excited about what this team is doing right here, right now. And Tom, we are about less than a half hour away from the kickoff. We know that they have Griff Vision that kicks over the OUA.TV coverage of the game, but we don't want to eat into too much of their conversation because, again, we know that we want to be in the stands to catch every moment of this. What are the things, what are their angles, stones that have been unturned with this at the 55 Bowl, the Battle of Highway 6, Guelph, Mac, a major matchup, 2-1 for Guelph, 1-2 for Mac. Blood rivalry, what have we not covered thus far?
We talked about the passing game for McMaster, and certainly it's going to be potent here. In that passing attack for Guelph last week against Laurier, Tristan Abreu and Marshall McRae collectively found 8 different receivers to catch the ball. Vashon Janusis obviously being the main breadwinner there, but 8 different targets, 8 different receivers caught the ball for Guelph in this one. I think the big piece of this, we've talked about the offenses a little bit, but the defense. Guelph defenses are always strong. They're always stout. 207 passing yards per game, 148 rushing yards, 4 interceptions in just 3 games. expect them to really use Bortuzzo, to put him into this game, to really take over and establish themselves on this side of the ball. So that Griffin defense is just as good as this offense. The last thing that I want to say, we've seen flashes from both of these special teams. We saw a callback on Everett Reed for a punt return touchdown. We saw a callback on Anakin Guthrie on a punt return touchdown. So we know that the special teams here have the capabilities, and you and I both know the single biggest thing that can switch momentum and change the outcome of a game is special teams and having that. So whoever comes out on top there could decide this game as well.
And we're seeing great things from the young guy in Kyle Simon Guerin as well, returning kicks and playing stellar defense for Guelph as well. Not just special teams, but, obviously the turnover game's massive and penalties. Guelph needs to seriously clean that up. In that U of T game, that was appalling on both sides of the ball in that one. But again, those are the marks of championship teams when you can make those corrections, get better throughout the season. And again, with a rivalry like this, that guy, you asked me that question before the Laurier game last week. Is Laurier and Guelph the best rivalry in OUA football, maybe even in U Sport football? Maybe a couple of teams in the RSCQ might lay claim to the best rivalry in U Sport. But as far as the best rivalry currently with how the clubs are going, maybe it's Laurier Guelph. I think what we're going to see here today will either confirm or deny your suspicions on that one, my friend Tom, we've been picking road teams all day long, and to no surprise, I'm going to break that trend myself. Give me Guelph at home on this one. Absolutely. We're going to send your team packing down Highway 6. What are you doing, my friend?
We've talked about this and how important it is for both teams here to get this win. Guelph gets this W. They are 3-1, completely own their destiny. Now, obviously, if they lose, they're 2-2. You can still take care of business, but you've got a lot of really tough games down the road as well. So this is going to be an important one. For McMaster, you're 1-2 right now. If you drop to 1-3, your entire season is in limbo. You have to come out and win the majority of your games in order to make the playoffs and to continue on here. If you get to 2-2, suddenly you now control your destiny a little bit. You then travel to Carleton, against a Carleton team that's certainly been struggling a little bit here. So lots of implications on both sides. Give me the Marauders on the road to win this game. I'm in enemy territory here. I'm sure I'm going to get
Boo this man.
Takes care of business in this one. The MAC team squeaks away with it. Drake Bodie and that defense does enough to limit what Guelph is so good at doing on offense. And MAC takes this one in the battle of at the 55 Bowl. I'm taking the Marauders.
And you know what? Again, hey, we were watching that team in Hamilton last week against the U of T team, much different from Guelph. But again, they made me scared going into this one. But however it shakes out, again, this is a rivalry that's going to continue to bring great matchups, that's going to seemingly flip-flop depending who's the favorite, who's the underdog. It doesn't seem to matter. Like we talk about with Carleton, Ottawa. Again, if you don't know about this matchup, we will certainly keep pumping it up. We certainly do that a lot, as is. But we are now less than 20 minutes away from kickoff. And if you can't tell, we're pretty excited. We want to catch every second of this one. So I'm going to wrap this one up. Again, a huge thank you to our friends at Royal Media making this happen for us live and direct. They were with Tom in Waterloo for East West. Major thank you to the Lang Innovation team for allowing us to use this space to be here, taking in. If you notice the crowd has been filtering out, that's because they all want to get in the stadium to check out this game. So, Tom, this has been outstanding. I can't wait to check out this game. I can't wait to check out all the other games around the OUA that we're so excited for. And if you don't know the brand, at the 55 podcast, at the 55, your home for OUA and U Sport football. We do previews, we do breakdowns of all the games. So, Tom, we're going to head into Alumni Stadium, check out this matchup. We're going to check out all the other games, and we'll be right back here to talk to you about it, right here at the 55.